Much for having me. I have been approached recently by quite a few media outlets, and this is the only one I chose to go on because the message that I had put out was intended for foreign audiences, and I feel like you guys have a pretty good base of foreign watchers.
You have participated in this panel discussion, as I say, part of which has gone viral. What was the panel about, and what main ideas did you talk about? What did you think triggered the huge reaction it has received so far, that even the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs decided to air your piece, or that particular piece of your speech, during its daily presser?
Yeah, it received quite a big response in China, although it was made specifically to speak to the overseas kind of areas where people are kind of being tricked by this propaganda. And it was actually kind of coincidental that we had this panel and then the sanctions, the more intense sanctions happened on Xinjiang afterwards. So I think kind of everything aligned for it to become very popular. So that's one of the reasons it became popular. And the whole concept was around examining and tearing apart some of the claims, talking about what the true intentions are behind the U.S. Pushing this narrative and funding it very generously. And just about kind of, Xinjiang in general. So that went on for, 2.5 hours. And by time it came out, as I said, it came out just in time for the sanctions.
What did you mainly talked about? I mean, that particular monologue you gave, what was the main idea in it?
Well, so the main idea was talking about the nature of the claims, how it doesn't really, a lot of the claims don't really hold up, how they fall apart when you question them with even, remotely logical questions. But also one important thing is that it talked about how you are not able in the West to really question it. The moment you question it, even if you're not convinced one way or the other, people call you a genocide denier. They really discourage you from standing in the middle while you figure this out. I think the same thing happened with the MPs in Canada when they voted on calling the situation in Xinjiang a genocide. They knew that they had to vote that way, that the public had been propagandized into believing this. And, compassion has been weaponized, and everybody's going to kind of fall in line. I think that's a good time to be scared because we've seen this kind of a thing before. Not only in terms of narratives being manufactured, whether it be weapons of mass destruction or other, false flag events, whatever they may be, but the problematic language that was used during that time as well, when George Bush said, you're either with us or against us. You cannot stand in the middle. You either have to be completely on board with us or you're our enemy. And you kind of see the same kind of a thing going on with this. I think that part of it struck home with a lot of people who in the West do want to question this. And that's perhaps why it became popular with some groups overseas as well.
Yeah. Well, you talked about some of the holes, which some of what's being said about Xinjiang, you said that doesn't stand. That is very easy if you look at it from a logical way, it just doesn't add up together. Could you give one or two examples about these allegations
Well, I mean,
in Xinjiang?
yeah, from a just the perspective of living here in China. So, living here in China, I mean, I know Uyghur people as well. If you just look at the fact that the Uyghur population is outgrowing the Han Chinese population, in part because they were never subject to the one-child policy, the fact that they can enter into universities with lower scores than everybody else, basically an affirmative action kind of a program. Halal foods are prepared for them in the cafeterias at these universities. The script, the Uyghur script is written on all of the cash in China. I mean, this is something we don't even do for our native populations in Canada. So it's not only a matter of, sometimes people point to, well, the biggest star in China is also a Uyghur as well. Some people think those are superficial arguments, but when you look at the whole picture, it really doesn't add up. I don't think to be clear, I don't think the situation is perfect. I think, after 2008, there was a racial profiling issue. There were some Uyghurs who were being refused access to hotels and things like that. And that's something even Chinese media wrote about, saying we shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. But even aside from that, having their documents checked more in airports and things like that. But the thing is that's a racial profiling issue, and it's wrong. But if the U.S. was going to have an honest question, honest conversation about this, in terms of pointing at racial profiling issues in China, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on. I mean, this is not something they've even figured out on their own. And arguably, China's handled it better in many ways. If you look at the racial profiling that happened after 9/11, people were targeted in a major way in the US as well. I mean, even if you had brown skin, you were at risk. There was a Sikh man who was killed in a gas station because he was mistaken as a Muslim. Mosques were being burned down. You would also go through increased security checks at the airport. It doesn't mean, this isn't a whataboutism to say then it's okay to racially profile here. I'm just saying that that's something they haven't even figured out. Where China did something different was during the time after that happened, Islamophobia was on the rise, and China came in and started censoring things that were overly Islamophobic. They tried to control this situation. Whereas in the West, they were free to say whatever they want, include spread rumors about people standing on building tops, waiting for the planes to hit buildings, which was completely false, which just kind of made the situation even worse for everybody.
Yeah. Well, in Xinjiang, we also have to remind people, or those who are not familiar with the situation, Xinjiang experienced a lot of terrorist attacks. So the security situation, of course, was much more stringent in that part of the world. And unfortunately, that is just what was necessary in order to, bring safety, bring security back to that place.